Oh, hey there. Juan Carlos Zulaga. Going to be doing a solo book review on Bill Bishop's Why the Clustering of America is Tearing Us Apart. Sorry, The Big Sword, Why the Clustering of America is Tearing Us Apart. Alright, so I'm going to start off by saying how in the early 1900s, political parties were not as socially and politically divided as they are today. Therefore, they did not disagree on as many issues in the nation. What's causing all these Democrats and Republicans to have different positions on nearly every single topic there is? Bill Bishop, the author of the book, The Big Sword, Why the Clustering of Like-Minded America is Tearing Us Apart, has shed light on the social issue that is sweeping social and political balkanization across America. So the sorting that is occurring in our American society is not a new trend. It's been around since the 1960s and 1970s. Well, actually began in the 1960s and 1970s when clustering, occurred because richer cities attracted people of a higher education, and then that resulted in economic differences between different cities. Well, great economic differences between cities. Like, you have neighboring cities, one could be a very poor one, while the other one neighboring it will be of a higher economic status, right? So, Bill Bishop believes that it created a system of division in America into several different subgroups. People move to locations distinctive to them. They consider the way they live, their hobbies, the community, churches, schools, and whatnot. So basically just the culture that the city is giving off, that's where they'll tend to move to. So as that happens, cities in the United States either became ultimately Democratic or ultimately Republican. So Bill Bishop states that mixed company moderates, like-minded company polarizes, heterogeneous communities restrain group success, while homogeneous communities march toward the extremes. And today, Democrats and Republicans almost always go their separate ways because they come from homogeneous districts with like-minded people. So there's no type of personal relationship once in a while, shared within the members of Congress from one party to another party. And that really matters because, if these Republicans or Democrats are only surrounding themselves with other Democrats or Republicans, well, with Democrats with the Democrats and Republicans with Republicans, then they never get to share, one another's ideas, and their ideas will only get stricter. They won't look at the other side per se. So even the media has been input because no one can even agree on the same facts. You have conservatives watching Fox, while liberals watch MSNBC. So everybody can kind of go their own way and watch the media and news that informs them in the way that they want to be informed, rather than them hearing the other side, like what the Republicans have to say or what the Democrats have to say. So I don't know. They kind of just stay on one side of the rope and not allowing themselves to go on the other side, so they can never come to a good casual agreement on things. So Bishop examined and closely studied voting records, IRS, income, wages, and poll numbers to find out what ways Americans have sorted themselves. And he discovered that millions of Americans have moved from one place to another and have clustered themselves in homogeneous communities. He writes that by the turn of the 21st century, it seems as though that the country has separated it in every conceivable way. Americans have always moved around continuously, but in our history, large amounts of people moved motivated by economic opportunities. And nowadays, though, Americans mainly migrate because of cultural beliefs rather than economical motives. So back in the day, people moved in on economical benefits. Like if California gold rush were to happen, I would go move to California. And if they had just oil strikes in Texas, well, I'm running to Texas. But nowadays, when you have people graduating from universities, and they have the chance to move out to, a city or big city that better benefits them and their career, they're gonna look, obviously the culture there and the political beliefs there that they offer there in that city, and rather than moving there because I can find a job here or this and that, they prefer to move there because I'm gonna be surrounded by Republicans there that believe the same thing I do, and life will just be easier for them that way, being around people that think like them, as Bill Bishop says, around like-minded citizens as they are. So the big sword does not seem to be driven by economic factors. Of course, where you live does result from where you can afford to live, but cultural factors matter more than income when it comes to preferences in political parties. For someone moving, they either have the option for a beat-down home or a nice one that are economically similar, but what it will be distinct by them is their culture. So from there we go on to how Americans are bubbling themselves basically in communities of people. So to continue on the topic, Americans have been bubbling themselves in communities of people just like themselves. We might not realize it, but that is what's been going on over time. Studies have almost proven it to be true. And after Bill Bishop's book, and after reading it and closely examining it, I'm really starting to see, how these geographic sorting, it accounts for great division in American politics, But because Congress is like almost nearly split right down the middle, with half of the nation, they disagree with one another, politically. And then the weird thing is, while you see like president elections like split 50-50 right down the middle, being so close, the weird thing is that you probably never or like very often encounter somebody that opposes your political views, like somebody who voted for the other side. That person, it might be like strange if that person lived very far, but counties extremely close to each other are sometimes opposing counties, and we don't even know. Well, not that we don't know, but we don't inform ourselves to know. But all this has caused presidential elections to be extremely close, and also accounts for increasing polarization. A great way to measure the sorting is by taking a look at the nation's changing electoral geography. Take this for consideration. In 1976, when Jimmy Carter won the presidential election with 50% of the popular vote, but even though he had half of the popular vote, 26.8% of the Americans were living in the landslide counties, even though it was a close race. So that is really odd. But the percentages of Americans living in landslide counties now has nearly doubled, if not doubled in size. I'm sorry. And in 1992, 38% of the nation lived in a landslide county. And by 2004, an incredible 50%. And it is just extremely odd that polls are so neck to neck. They're so tight. Like half of the nation believes this, and half of the nation believes that. So everyone that I know basically agrees on the same thing I do politically. On the same political issues, on all that matter, but no one is harmed by people living with like-minded neighbors, but Bill Bishop does warn about some of its consequences. So Bishop states, and I quote, "Balkanized communities whose inhabitants find each other Americans to be culturally incomprehensible, and since Democratic and Republicans hardly encounter one another, they assume the other's views are not legitimate." Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Since say two different soccer teams are rivals, Democratic, Republicans, whatever, and they obviously aren't going to practice together, so how would the two ever come to, a good term, like a good game? As they should say, one will always come out winning and one would always come out losing. None of them are ever going to go home happy, but that's just the way it's created to be. So, even studies show that when a group is ideally homogenous, that its members of that group tend to grow more extreme. So that can result in voters from landslide counties electing more extreme members of Congress. Bill Bishop does have a point, because how are lawmakers ever going to reach the necessary motion to solve long-term issues when they are divided in almost every single way possible? Since members of Congress came from homogeneous cluster districts surrounded by like-minded people just like them, there's really no relation between the two parties. So Democrats never socialize with Republicans, other than when they're there sitting and debating. So since they don't have very close relations, Democrats and Republicans, then their viewpoints are either I strongly agree with this and I strongly oppose this, and that's basically how it is. So that ultimately causes, Congress to be unproductive, considering that now nearly nothing ever gets passed to end disputes on large issues such as healthcare, immigration, and so on, And I would like to end off by saying the members of Congress, they would put small patches to cover the holes that we have in our American society, but till they unsort themselves, these social and political issues will continue to bounce around and be an issue.